Welcome to this new automotive news video for Sunday, May 3rd, 2026. Today we're going to talk about Mazda, which wants to save combustion engines thanks to a rather unique innovation. We're talking about Shell, one of the world's largest oil companies, now looking to sell its own electric cars. We're also discussing Nissan, which is dropping several electric car projects after investing nearly €1 billion. And General Motors, the American giant, which is reinvesting several $100 million in the production of a new generation of V8 combustion engines. And finally, we'll talk about Ford, which has just issued what seems to be the biggest recall of 2026 so far, with 1,400,000 vehicles recalled. I hope these Sunday topics will interest you. If that's the case, as usual, don't forget to show your support. You can support my channel for free by subscribing. You can leave a like on this video, boost it if that option appears for you, and leave a comment where you simply share your opinion about today's news. Shall we get started? Let's begin with a big topic about Mazda. Mazda continues to believe in the combustion engine, keeps innovating with this type of engine, and has just filed a patent for a new combustion engine technology that's truly unique. The main feature of this engine, before we get into the technical details, is that it aims to produce its own hydrogen on board the vehicle by using gasoline. The goal here is to reduce fuel consumption, to also lower CO2 emissions while addressing the main issues with hydrogen. Hydrogen is extremely complicated to transport. It requires ultra-high pressure tanks. And because of these transportation difficulties, there are very few stations where you can refuel a hydrogen vehicle. So by producing it directly on board the vehicle from gasoline, we are, in a way, solving this problem. It might sound a bit magical, but in reality, this system is based on a chemical and physical phenomenon that's already known. It's called fuel reforming. In practice, you would first need to drive a few kilometers with an engine running entirely on gasoline to reach a certain engine temperature, and then reuse the heat produced by the engine to speed up a chemical reaction on board the vehicle. Once a certain temperature is reached, the vehicle will automatically redirect part of the exhaust gases into a catalyst, where, thanks to the heat, among other things, the remaining octane molecules in these exhaust gases will be broken down to recover the hydrogen atoms, since an octane molecule is actually made up of 8 carbon atoms and 18 hydrogen atoms. This catalyst and the heat would be used to recover these hydrogen molecules, which, through an auxiliary circuit, could return to the combustion chamber and trigger a new combustion cycle. It's a kind of recycling loop that allows the energy still contained in the exhaust gases to be reused to improve the engine's fuel efficiency. The use of gasoline and hydrogen is not the only special feature of the engine. There are 2 others. This is possible because the engine is a 6-stroke, not a traditional 4-stroke engine. Indeed, a traditional 4-stroke engine works thanks to 4 successive steps. The first is intake, during which the piston moves down in the cylinder and a valve opens to let in the air-fuel mixture. The second step is compression, where the piston moves up in the cylinder and compresses the air-fuel mixture. The third step is combustion, where the air-fuel mixture is ignited, causing an explosion in the cylinder that pushes the piston down. And a fourth step, exhaust, where the piston moves up again and expels the burnt gases out of the cylinder. That's the traditional cycle of a 4-stroke engine. Mazda wants to add 2 extra phases to a complete combustion cycle. A recompression phase, where the exhaust gases are redirected to a decomposition system, which is the famous catalyst I mentioned to you earlier, and a re-expansion phase, after transforming the exhaust gas and gasoline mixture into hydrogen, which technically allows combustion to restart without actually using more gasoline, which actually helps to reduce fuel consumption and also, technically, on paper, CO2 emissions. A 6-stroke system that works nothing like the 6-stroke system that Porsche patented last year, and which we talked about in another video, where, in that case, it was more about restarting a compression and combustion phase thanks to a rather complex mechanism that allowed the stroke to vary. So, let's say the distance a piston travels in a cylinder to restart a combustion cycle. And finally, Mazda wants to reuse another system I mentioned in another video, a carbon capture system, CO2. Instead of being released into the air, it's stored using another chemical process in a kind of small tank, to be emptied at a gas station and later recovered for other industrial processes. So it's an engine that, on paper, should be incredible. It's almost like magic, since it would allow us to keep all the advantages of a combustion engine, both in terms of driving pleasure and versatility, by emitting almost no CO2 thanks to CO2 capture, without suffering from the various problems of hydrogen, especially the main one, which is storage, both during hydrogen transport and storage in the vehicle. Now, it has to be said, even though it looks great on paper, it's still an extremely complex technology, both to produce, to industrialize, and to maintain, with costs that could be very high, which makes short-term commercialization quite unlikely. What's quite interesting here is that it shows that Japanese and German manufacturers, by the way, still have their feet on the ground and haven't done like the French manufacturers who have completely abandoned combustion engine technology. The Japanese and Germans are exploring various technologies to stay prepared for changes or to keep producing and selling combustion engine vehicles where they're still permitted. By the way, speaking of exploring all possibilities and imagining every option, one of the biggest oil companies in the world, Shell, is getting into electric cars. The company is working on a small SUV that would follow the rule Shell set for itself, the 10-10 Challenge rule, a concept that must meet three specific goals: charging from 10 to 80% of the battery in less than 10 minutes, and an average consumption that allows it to exceed 10 km per or W, and a total carbon footprint of less than 10 tons of CO2 over the entire life cycle. Now, it's the same story. It would be really impressive. On paper, it's kind of like magic, honestly. Currently, almost no vehicle worldwide can meet the 10-10 challenge, especially since the technical documentation states the vehicle must weigh no more than 1,000 kilograms. That's much less than the weight of most current electric cars. To achieve this goal, Shell uses a whole bunch of carbon fiber elements in this vehicle. It's true that carbon fiber is great. It's very strong, it's very light, but on the other hand, it's also very expensive. An SUV made entirely of carbon fiber, so the chassis, the body, and some interior elements, would cost at least 150,000 euros. Clearly, it's not meant for everyone. As for the battery, Shell would like to reuse one of the systems that Mercedes used for its new electric AMG GT, namely liquid cooling for the battery. The battery is immersed in a kind of liquid that isn't conductive. Obviously, it's not water, which helps better regulate the battery's temperature rise. This allows for good range, but above all, it enables ultra-fast charging without overheating. So we'll see what Shell manages to come up with in the next few months when it comes to electric cars. What's certain is that it's more about Shell wanting to show that it's already positioning itself as a key player, let's say, in electric vehicles if they were to become global tomorrow. And it's not necessarily going to happen anytime soon. When you see what's happening in the United States with Nissan, which has simply abandoned all its electric car projects in the US, literally all of them. However, Nissan had heavily invested to produce various electric vehicles there. To give you an idea of how much Nissan invested in electric cars, know that they spent at least $500 million just to modernize one of their factories, the one in Canton, which was supposed to produce electric cars. In the end, that's not going to happen. Nissan is now abandoning billions of euros invested in the United States for nothing. Nissan explains this change of direction by, and I quote, Nissan's desire to better adapt to market conditions, customer demand, and its new strategic direction. Basically, what you need to understand is that in the United States, electric cars have been dropping sharply for several months, ever since there are no more purchase incentives for buying them. The market share of electric cars in the United States fell below 5% in April 2026. So clearly, the vast majority of Americans are only buying gasoline or hybrid vehicles. And since the American market is simply Nissan's biggest market, they have no choice but to comply with the customers' wishes and produce in their factories 4x4s pickups and SUVs with internal combustion engines. And it's not the American automotive giant General Motors who will contradict Nissan on this point. Because for exactly the same reasons, due to the decline of electric cars in the United States, General Motors is massively reinvesting in the production of vehicles and internal combustion engines. For example, the group just invested 650 million euros in a Canadian factory for production. A new generation of 6.7 V8 engines will certainly be a bit more optimized in terms of fuel consumption than the previous generation. But we're still talking about a 6.7 V8. So there's a real and growing divide between American and European cars. And by the way, since we're talking about American brands, let's finish by talking about our champion of the day, Ford, which is organizing the biggest recall of 2026 so far. Maybe it will be beaten later by another brand. It's a problem that concerns their new generation 6-speed automatic transmission, which is likely to suddenly downshift into second gear for no apparent reason. That's a real safety issue since it can cause the drive wheels to slip and lead to a loss of control of the vehicle, an anomaly that would be caused by the deterioration of electronic connections in the various transmission sensors, which would be caused by heat and by the vehicle's vibrations. This concerns the F-Series pickups that were produced between 2014 and 2017, and it's really unlucky for them because last year there were already 800,000 vehicles from this series that were recalled for similar problems. Obviously, this mainly concerns the American markets, but the F pickups were also imported and sold in France, especially during that period when there wasn't yet a significant tax penalty. You might be affected if you own one of these massive pickups. That's it. We've covered today's news. I hope you found the video interesting. If that's the case, please show it by leaving a like. subscribing for future videos, and supporting the channel by clicking the join button. I'll see you very soon, as early as tomorrow, for the next video. Bye.